The first thing Ethan Cole noticed about the town of Black Alder, West Virginia, was how quiet it was. Not the peaceful kind of quiet you pay money to find, the wrong kind, the kind that sits behind curtains, the kind that makes your footsteps sound too loud, and makes strangers smile without their eyes. Ethan had come here for the same reason he went anywhere now, to disappear in plain sight. A decade in uniform had taught him one brutal truth. When you've seen enough chaos, the world stops feeling real unless you can hear something simple again. Wind through trees, water hitting rock, a dog breathing beside you in the dark, something honest. He'd rented a small cabin outside town, down a narrow county road that curled through bare hardwoods and rusting old mine equipment half swallowed by vines. The cabin smelled like pine cleaner and cold wood. It had a metal stove, a sagging porch swing, and a view of a creek that ran black as coffee when the rain came. It was perfect. Rex thought so too. Rex was a German shepherd with the posture of a soldier, and the eyes of someone who had learned to read danger before it arrived. Ethan didn't talk about Rex's past to anyone, not because he was hiding something, but because people always reacted the same way when they heard working dog and war in the same sentence. They wanted stories. They wanted hero moments. They wanted to pet him like he was a trophy. Rex wasn't a trophy. He was a partner, a shadow, a heartbeat that kept Ethan anchored when the nights got loud. For the first 2 weeks in Black Alder, the routine held. Morning run along the creek, coffee on the porch, Rex patrolling the property like the land was theirs by right. Then Ethan would drive into town, buy groceries at the only market, nod to people who nodded back, and keep his head down. Then, on a Tuesday night in late October, Rex refused to come inside. It started small. Ethan opened the back door and gave the quiet command. Inside. Rex didn't move. He stood at the edge of the yard where the grass turned into leaf litter, body rigid, head low, ears forward like antennae tuned to a frequency Ethan couldn't hear. At first, Ethan thought it was a deer. Then he followed Rex's stare. Beyond the tree line, down the slope toward the creek, there was a concrete drainage culvert, an old storm tunnel that disappeared under the county road. It was stained dark with years of runoff. It wasn't anything special, just a mouth in the earth. But Rex looked at it like it had teeth. "Rex!" Ethan kept his voice calm, like he was speaking to a teammate in a bad hallway. "Come." The dog didn't blink. A low sound gathered in Rex's chest, not a bark, not a growl of aggression. Something deeper. Warning. Ethan stepped onto the damp grass, boots sinking slightly. He didn't rush Rex. You didn't rush instinct. You didn't override it because you wanted peace. Peace was something you earned, not something you demanded. He moved to Rex's side and crouched, eyes narrowing at the culvert. Nothing moved, no flashlight, no footsteps, no animal, just the smell of wet leaves, and the creek whispering through the dark. But Rex's posture didn't soften. Ethan felt the hair on his own arms rise the way it had before ambushes, the body remembering before the mind understood. He reached out, laid a hand on Rex's shoulder. Rex flinched, not away from Ethan, but away from the direction of the culvert, as if even contact was a risk. Then Rex did something that made Ethan's stomach sink. The dog turned his head slightly, looked at Ethan, not with fear, not with confusion, but with that rare, intense look that meant one thing. You need to see this. And then he stepped forward, 2 slow paces, and stopped again, still staring into the black mouth beneath the road. Ethan didn't sleep much that night. He sat in the dark with the lights off, watching the yard through the kitchen window. Rex lay on the floor by the back door, eyes open, ears flicking at every tiny sound. Twice Ethan heard something shift down by the creek, just a soft scrape that could have been rock, could have been water, could have been nothing. And both times, Rex's head snapped to attention, like a magnet finding metal. At dawn, Ethan made coffee he didn't taste, clipped Rex's leash on, even though the dog hated it, and walked down toward the culvert. The air was cold enough to sting. Mist hung low over the creek like breath. The closer they got, the more Rex pulled, not frantic, focused. At 10 yards, Rex's hackles rose. At 5, he stopped dead, planted his feet, and leaned away from the culvert as if the ground in front of it was hot. Ethan scanned the area, and then he saw it, a line in the mud near the culvert's edge. too straight, too clean, like something had been dragged. He crouched, fingers hovering over the disturbed soil without touching it. The mud was darker there, turned recently. Leaf litter had been brushed aside, but not carefully enough. Rex lowered his head, sniffed once, then gave a soft whine that sounded almost human. Ethan's jaw tightened. He'd smelled that smell in other places. Places that didn't have names on maps. Decay wasn't always obvious. Sometimes it hid under wet earth and cold water, and the assumption that no one would look. Ethan stood slowly, gaze sweeping wider. On the far side of the culvert, half hidden among briars, was something bright. Plastic. A corner of it, snagged on a branch like a flag. Ethan stepped around carefully, keeping his boots off the dragline. He reached with 2 fingers and lifted it free. It was a laminated ID badge, the kind you clip to a lanyard. The photo was smeared, water damaged, but the name was still readable. Mara Ellis. Below it, in smaller print, State Environmental Compliance. Ethan stared at it, mind clicking through possibilities. Black Alder was an old mining town. Everyone knew it. The hills still carried scars from where men had dug the earth open and taken what they wanted. There were rumors of new drilling now, new money, new contracts. Compliance badges didn't end up in culverts by accident. Rex made a small sound and pawed at the mud near the culvert's edge. One precise scrape, then stopped, looking up at Ethan like he was waiting. Ethan exhaled slowly. He didn't want this. He had come here to be nobody. But the world didn't care what you wanted. Ethan pulled out his phone and took photos of everything. The dragline, the badge location, the culvert mouth, the disturbed soil. He didn't touch anything else. He didn't dig. Not yet. He clipped the badge into a zip bag from his pocket kit like it was evidence. Because it was. Then he turned Rex away from the culvert. Rex didn't stop staring until they were back at the cabin. By noon, the sky had turned the color of bruised steel. Rain threatened. Ethan drove into town, Rex in the passenger seat, both of them silent. Black Alder's main street was short, a diner with a faded sign, a hardware store, a post office, a bar that looked closed even when it wasn't. At the end of the street, the sheriff's office sat like a squat brick bunker. Ethan parked, stepped inside, and felt every pair of eyes turn toward him. A woman behind the counter looked up, mid-chew of gum. Her uniform was neat. Her smile wasn't. "Can I help you?" Ethan placed his hands on the counter, palms visible. He kept his tone neutral. "Found something near the county road by the creek. Looks like a missing person might be involved." Her eyes sharpened a fraction. "Missing person? ID badge, drag marks, smell." That did it. The gum stopped chewing. She stood up. "Wait here." She disappeared into the back. A minute later, a man emerged. Sheriff was written on his chest, but the way he carried himself said he'd never had to fight for authority a day in his life. Late 40s, thick neck, clean shave, eyes that assessed Ethan like a problem to solve. "I'm Sheriff Dalton Price," he said, extending a hand. Ethan didn't take it, not because he was rude, because he didn't shake hands with men who stood too comfortably between him and the truth. "I'm Ethan Cole." Dalton's eyes flicked to Ethan's posture, his stance, the way he didn't fidget. "Cole," he repeated like it tasted familiar. "What did you find?" Ethan slid his phone across and showed the photos. He didn't hand over the bag. Dalton studied the screen, expression tightening, then smoothing again, too fast. "That's out near Miller's Creek," Dalton said. Ethan watched him carefully. "Yes." Dalton nodded slowly. "We've had kids dump trash down there. Could be anything?" Ethan didn't blink. "Not trash." Dalton's gaze drifted briefly to the window, as if checking the street, then back. "Who's the badge belong to?" "Mara Ellis." Dalton's face didn't change, but something in his eyes did, something like calculation. "Haven't heard of her," he said easily. "You sure it's local?" "It says State Environmental Compliance." Dalton let out a small laugh that didn't reach his eyes. "Those folks rotate, come and go. Probably dropped it, probably nothing." Ethan leaned forward slightly. "I smelled a body." The room went still. The deputy behind the counter stopped moving entirely. Dalton's smile vanished. For a beat, Ethan thought Dalton might actually do the right thing. Then Dalton's face settled into something that looked like annoyance wearing the mask of patience. "Mr. Cole," Dalton said, voice low, "you're new here. You find something weird, you call us, you let us handle it." "I did call you," Ethan said. "I'm here." Dalton held Ethan's gaze. "And now you'll leave it with us." Ethan didn't move. "I'm not handing you evidence without a report number." Dalton's jaw tightened. "You want to make this difficult?" Ethan's voice stayed calm. "I want it done right." Dalton leaned closer, his breath smelling faintly like coffee and something sour underneath. "Done right means you stop playing hero. You go back to your cabin. You let this town stay quiet." Rex growled from outside the door, not loud, not dramatic, just enough to remind everyone in the room that Ethan didn't come alone. Dalton's eyes flicked toward the sound, his nostrils flared. Then he straightened, put a professional smile back on, like a hat. "Fine," he said. "Report number, you'll get it. Deputy will take your info, we'll send someone out." Ethan nodded once. "Today." Dalton's smile sharpened. "Today." Ethan wrote his name and address on a form that felt too thin, too casual for what he'd found. He left the office with his instincts screaming. In the truck, Rex stared at him, ears forward, waiting. Ethan didn't speak. He just drove back toward the cabin with the feeling that he'd just stepped onto a board and heard it creak. That evening, rain came hard. It hammered the roof, turned the yard into a slick sheet of mud, and filled the creek until it roared louder than usual. Ethan watched the road from the porch, waiting for a patrol car. None came. At 9, still nothing. At 10, the only headlights that appeared weren't blue and white. They were bright, modern, and wrong for a place like this. A black pickup rolled slowly down Ethan's gravel drive. New, expensive, tinted windows. It stopped in the clearing like it owned the space. Ethan's body went cold. Rex stood beside him, muscles bunched, silent. The driver's door opened. A man stepped out wearing a rain jacket that probably cost more than Ethan's monthly rent. He wasn't local. He was too clean, too controlled. Late 30s, lean build, hair slicked back even in the rain, eyes pale and hard. He looked at Ethan like Ethan was a fence he planned to climb. "Ethan Cole," he called. Ethan didn't answer immediately. He let the silence stretch. The man smiled slightly. "Name's Grant Larkin. I work with a company that's investing in Black Alder." Ethan's eyes narrowed. "Good for you." Grant chuckled, as if amused by Ethan's lack of warmth. "Sheriff Price told me you came by today." That single sentence changed the air. Ethan felt it like a wire pulled tight. "You share reports with private investors now?" Ethan asked. Grant held up his hands. "Relax. This town's small. People talk. That culvert area is near one of our sites. If you found something, we want to make sure it's handled properly." Rex's lips curled back slightly, showing teeth. Grant's gaze flicked to the dog, and for the first time his smile wavered. "That's a serious animal." "He's a good judge of character," Ethan said, flat. Grant let out a breath and nodded toward the woods. "Look, Mr. Cole, you came here for quiet, right? You didn't come here to get tangled in other people's problems." Ethan didn't respond. Grant took a step closer. The rain slid off his jacket. His boots didn't sink much. Too new, too stiff. "There's a lot of history in these hills," Grant continued. "Old grudges, old accidents. People get hurt. People disappear. Sometimes it's best not to dig up what the ground has already claimed." Ethan's hand stayed loose at his side, but his whole body had shifted into something else. Something that had nothing to do with cabins and quiet. "You came here to threaten me," Ethan said. Grant's smile returned, thin as paper. "No, I came here to offer you an easy exit." He reached into his pocket, pulled out an envelope, and held it up in the rain. "Relocation payment," he said. "Cashier's check, enough to pack up, move, forget this place ever existed." Ethan stared at the envelope like it was a snake. "I'm renting," Ethan said. "I don't own anything here." Grant's eyes sharpened. "Then it's even easier." Ethan's voice dropped. "Tell Sheriff Price I'm not going anywhere." Grant's smile faded. For the first time, irritation showed through the polished surface. "You really want to be stubborn," Grant said softly. "Fine, but understand something." He nodded toward the tree line where the culvert lay hidden in darkness. "Things down there? They don't stay buried because the earth is kind. They stay buried because people make sure of it. Rex took one step forward, a sound vibrating in his chest like thunder. Grant held Ethan's gaze a moment longer, then backed away, raised his hands again. "No hard feelings," he said, and climbed back into his truck. As the pickup turned and rolled away, its taillights glowing red through the rain, Ethan realized something with a cold clarity. Sheriff Price hadn't just dismissed him. Sheriff Price had sent someone to measure him, to see if he'd fold. Ethan went inside, shut the door, locked it, then checked the windows. Rex paced once, then stopped by the back door, staring toward the culvert again. Ethan didn't sleep. At 2:17 a.m., Rex froze. Not bark, not growl, freeze. Ethan woke instantly, hand already reaching under the table where he'd placed what he needed within reach. A sound floated through the rain, soft tires on gravel. Ethan moved to the window, peered through a gap in the curtain. 2 vehicles, a sheriff's cruiser, and a dark SUV behind it. They stopped at the edge of Ethan's clearing. The cruiser's lights stayed off. The driver's door opened. Sheriff Dalton Price stepped out into the rain like he was stepping into a familiar room. The SUV's door opened next. 3 men got out. Not deputies, not locals. Big, quiet, hooded jackets. The kind of men who didn't talk much because they didn't need to. Ethan's mouth went dry. Rex made a low sound, not loud enough to be heard outside, but intense enough to vibrate through the floorboards. Ethan knelt, placed a hand on Rex's neck. "Stay with me," he whispered. Then he moved. He didn't turn on lights. He didn't rush to the front door. He slipped out the back, through the kitchen, and into the rain-soaked night with Rex at his heel like a shadow. The woods behind the cabin were thick. Ethan used them like cover, moving along a line he had already walked during daylight. Fallen logs, boulders, low brush. A soldier's map. He found a position behind a big oak, sightline toward the clearing. Dalton stood in the rain, talking to the men from the SUV. Ethan couldn't hear words over the creak and rain, but he didn't need to. Body language told the story. Dalton pointed toward the cabin. One of the men nodded. Another looked toward the woods briefly, an instinctive scan. Ethan pressed himself tighter to the tree. Rex's body was tense, waiting. The men started toward the porch. Dalton stayed back, hands on hips, watching like a supervisor. Ethan's heart beat slow and heavy. This wasn't a welfare check. This was cleanup. Ethan inhaled once, held it, then let it out through his nose. He needed proof, not just instinct, not just a gut feeling. Proof that the sheriff was involved. He glanced down at Rex. The dog's eyes were locked on the men moving toward the cabin. Ethan's brain moved fast. If they went inside, they could plant something, remove something, destroy something. Ethan made a decision. He whistled once, sharp, high, a sound that cut clean through rain. A command frequency Rex knew better than any word. Rex exploded into motion, not toward the men. Away. A dark blur crossing the far edge of the clearing near the tree line, deliberately visible. The effect was immediate. One of the hooded men snapped his head toward the movement. Another lifted a hand as if signaling. Dalton's posture changed. He leaned forward slightly, attention pulled. And in that small moment of distraction, Ethan moved. He stepped out from behind the oak, raised his phone, and snapped a photo. Dalton Price in the rain with 3 unknown men. No lights, no protocol, no reason to be here at 2 a.m. Then another. Then another. A hooded man saw the flash. He pointed. Everything accelerated at once. Ethan ran, not toward the cabin, toward the culvert. Because Rex had been warning him for days, and because Ethan suddenly understood the truth. The culvert wasn't just where someone had left evidence. It was where someone had used the earth. Ethan sprinted through wet brush, Rex reappearing at his side like he'd been pulled by an invisible tether. Behind them, voices shouted. Footsteps crashed through leaves. The rain made everything slick and loud and chaotic. Ethan reached the slope above the creek and slid down, grabbing roots, boots skidding. The culvert yawned ahead, a black mouth under the road. Rex stopped at the edge, whining sharply, then looked back at Ethan and pawed the ground. Again, precise, intentional. Ethan's eyes locked onto the mud line. He saw it now in the dim light. Fresh disturbance along the culvert's sidewall, not just the ground. Someone had moved stones. Someone had tried to seal something. Ethan dropped to his knees, fingers digging into cold mud. A flashlight beam snapped on behind him. "Cole!" Dalton's voice cut through the rain. "Stop right there." Ethan didn't stop. He shoved his hand deeper and felt something that wasn't mud. Plastic. He yanked. A small waterproof case came free. Black, sealed, the kind contractors used for tools or sensitive gear. Rex barked once, sharp, urgent. Ethan popped the latch with shaking fingers. Inside was a phone. Not a cheap one. A rugged encrypted model, and beneath it, a flash drive wrapped in duct tape. Ethan's breath caught. Dalton's boots slid down the slope behind him, closer now. One of the hooded men shouted, "He's got it!" Ethan spun, case in hand, rain hitting his face like needles. Dalton stood 5 yards away, gun drawn, not a standard service pistol, something heavier, something personal. "Put it down," Dalton said, voice steady but eyes burning. "That doesn't belong to you." Ethan's voice was calm, even as everything inside him tightened like a wire. "A woman's missing badge says otherwise." Dalton's jaw clenched. "You don't know what you're holding." "I know enough," Ethan said. Behind Dalton, 2 hooded men moved, trying to flank on the slope. Rex stepped forward, body low, growl rising, positioning himself between Ethan and them like a living wall. Dalton's eyes flicked to the dog, and his mouth twisted. "You and your damn dog." Ethan's mind made a clean calculation. Dalton wasn't here to arrest him. Dalton was here to end him. Ethan tightened his grip on the case. "Back away." Dalton laughed once, short, humorless. "You think you're gonna walk out of here, in the rain, through the woods, with something half the county's been paid to keep quiet?" Half the county. That was the line that told Ethan this went deeper than one crooked sheriff. Ethan's eyes narrowed. "Who's paying you?" Dalton's face hardened. "Doesn't matter." Dalton raised the gun higher. Rex lunged, not at Dalton's throat, at Dalton's gun arm, a blur of muscle and teeth in training. Dalton fired, one shot cracking through the rain. The bullet hit the concrete culvert wall, sparks flashing. Rex hit Dalton like a battering ram, clamping down with controlled force. Dalton screamed, stumbling, trying to shake the dog off. Ethan moved. He didn't have time for a clean fight. He had time for survival. He drove his shoulder into the nearest hooded man, sending him sliding down into the creek with a splash. Another man grabbed Ethan's jacket, trying to pull him back. Ethan pivoted, broke the grip, slammed an elbow into ribs he felt give. Rex was still locked onto Dalton's arm like a vice, immobilizing him. Dalton's gun fell into mud. Dalton reached with his free hand for something at his belt. Knife. Ethan saw it, lunged, and stomped Dalton's wrist hard enough to make the knife flip away into darkness. Dalton howled, face contorted with rage. Rex released instantly on Ethan's quiet command. No hesitation, no chaos, just discipline. Ethan stepped back, breathing hard, rain dripping from his hair. Dalton rolled in mud, clutching his arm, eyes wild. "You don't understand," Dalton spat. "You're dead either way." Ethan's voice stayed low. "Maybe, but you're going first." A new sound cut through everything. An engine. Headlights swept across the road above the culvert. A vehicle had stopped on the bridge. A door opened. A voice called out from above, startled, confused. "Sheriff, what the hell?" Dalton froze. For a fraction of a second, fear flashed through his eyes. Not fear of Ethan. Fear of being seen. Ethan's mind snapped into focus. A witness. A random local. Dalton shouted up, "Go home, now!" The voice hesitated. "You're hurt! Go!" Dalton roared. Ethan looked up through rain and saw a silhouette on the bridge, an older man in a cap holding a flashlight. And in that moment, Ethan understood the most dangerous thing about Dalton Price. He didn't care about murder. He cared about control. Ethan made a decision without thinking. He raised his voice to the bridge. "Call 911, he shouted. "Tell them Sheriff Price is armed and there's evidence of a homicide in this culvert." The older man froze, flashlight beam wobbling. Dalton's face changed. Pure panic. He scrambled toward his fallen gun. Rex snapped forward again, blocking. Dalton cursed, then looked at his men, 2 still standing, 1 in the creek groaning. "Get him!" Dalton screamed. The hooded men surged. Ethan backed into the culvert mouth itself, water running around his boots. He held the waterproof case close to his chest like it was a heart. Rex stayed in front, teeth bared. The culvert echoed with rain and footsteps and the roar of the creek. Ethan's brain ran a clean line. If they pinned him here, it was over. He needed out. He needed leverage. He needed the truth to be loud enough that even a corrupt sheriff couldn't smother it. Ethan glanced down at the case, then at Dalton. "You want this?" Ethan called. Dalton's eyes locked onto it like it was oxygen. "Yes," Dalton hissed. "That's not yours." Ethan lifted it higher. "Then tell me whose it is." Dalton's mouth twisted. "You don't want to know." Ethan took a slow breath. "Try me." Dalton hesitated, and that hesitation told Ethan everything. Whatever was on that phone, whatever was on that flash drive, it wasn't just evidence of a body. It was evidence of a machine. Ethan's voice dropped into something cold. "Mara Ellis didn't lose her badge," he said. "She was here. She was investigating. And she hid this before she died." Dalton's face contorted. "She was a problem." Ethan nodded once. "There it is." The older man on the bridge shouted, "I'm calling!" Dalton's eyes flashed. "No!" Dalton lunged forward. Rex met him, not with teeth this time, just body. Rex slammed into Dalton's legs, sweeping him off balance. Dalton hit the concrete hard, gasping. Ethan used the opening. He ran, not up the slope, too exposed. He ran through the culvert. Cold water surged around his boots, soaking his pants, numbing his legs. Rex followed without hesitation, a dark shape moving with him through the echoing tunnel as flashlight beams danced behind them, bouncing off wet concrete like ghosts. Halfway through, Ethan heard Dalton screaming orders, heard boots splashing into the culvert after them. Ethan kept running. The tunnel spat them out on the other side into a ditch choked with weeds and debris. Ethan scrambled up, lungs burning, rain pouring. He didn't go back to the cabin. He didn't go to town. He went where nobody would think to look, because nobody in Black Alder went there anymore. The old mine tipple, a rusted skeletal structure on a ridge above town, abandoned decades ago when the coal thinned and men stopped coming home. Ethan had seen it on a morning run, a place that looked dead, but still had vantage. He and Rex reached it soaked, shivering, adrenaline keeping them upright. Ethan ducked under rusted beams, found a small shed-like office with a broken window, and shoved the door closed behind them. Inside, the air smelled like wet metal and old dust. Ethan's hands shook as he opened the waterproof case. He pulled out the rugged phone and pressed the power button. Nothing. He tried again. The screen flickered, then lit. Password protected. Of course it was. Ethan's mind raced. Mara Ellis had been smart enough to hide it, smart enough to lock it. But she'd also wanted someone to find it. People who hide evidence usually leave a way to open it. He searched the case again and found a small folded slip of paper tucked into the lining, soaked but readable. 4 numbers. 1986. Ethan stared. A year. A code. He punched it in. The phone unlocked. And what filled the screen made Ethan's stomach drop hard. Video files, audio recordings, photos. One photo stopped him cold. Sheriff Dalton Price, shaking hands with Grant Larkin, standing beside a sign that read, Black Alder Water Restoration Project. A fake smile, a stage picture. The next photo, barrels being unloaded at night behind the old water plant. The next, a map with red circles along the creek, then an audio recording. Ethan hit play, a woman's voice, tired, controlled, angry beneath the calm. "This is Mara Ellis. If you're hearing this, it means I couldn't get out." Ethan's throat tightened. Mara continued, voice steady. "They're dumping chemical waste into Miller's Creek to cut costs. They're poisoning the water and paying the town to stay quiet. The sheriff's office is involved. The clinic is involved. The restoration project is a front. I have proof. Contracts, payments, shipments, names." A pause. A breath. "I tried the state hotline. The calls didn't go through. Someone intercepted them. I tried the FBI field office in Charleston. 2 hours later, Sheriff Price showed up at my motel." Ethan clenched his jaw. Mara's voice softened just slightly. "I hid the drive. I hid the backup in the culvert because I knew they'd look in my car and my room. If someone finds this, don't go to Black Alder law enforcement. Don't go to the county. Another pause. Rain hissed outside the broken window. Go to the federal EPA criminal unit directly, or a major news desk. If you take this to the wrong place, you'll disappear too. The recording ended. Ethan sat back against the wall, chest tight. This wasn't just murder. It was a town being slowly poisoned, controlled by money, enforced by fear. And now Ethan was holding the one thing that could burn it down. Rex sat beside him, wet fur steaming slightly in the cold air, eyes locked on Ethan's face like he was reading the next move. Ethan didn't have the luxury of a long plan. Dalton would be hunting him. Grant Larkin would be hunting him. And if Mara was right, the county itself might be compromised. Ethan's phone buzzed. No service out here. But his own phone still had a faint signal on the ridge, a voicemail notification. He listened. It was a calm, recorded voice from an unknown number. Ethan Cole, this is Grant Larkin. You've made a mistake. Bring the device back to the sheriff's office by sunrise. You walk away. You don't, and we can't guarantee your dog survives what's coming. Ethan's blood went cold. He looked at Rex. Rex stared back, steady, unblinking. Ethan's voice came out rough. They threatened you. Rex leaned in and pressed, his head against Ethan's knee like a quiet answer. Then we don't give them what they want. Ethan stood. He zipped the phone and drove back into the waterproof case. He tucked it inside his jacket, tight against his chest. Then he pulled out his own phone and opened a secure contact he hadn't used in a long time. A man he trusted the way you trust someone you've bled beside. A man who didn't ask questions first. Ethan hit call. It rang twice. A voice answered, low and sharp. Cole. Ethan swallowed. It's Ethan. A pause. You don't call unless the world's on fire. Ethan stared out the broken window at the rain, the town lights faint in the distance. It is, he said. I need a federal extraction, and I need it clean. Another pause, then, where are you? Ethan gave the coordinates. The voice didn't hesitate. Stay alive. Don't trust anyone local. If they're threatening your dog, they're already out of options. Ethan's grip tightened on the phone. They'll come tonight. Let them, the voice said, but don't let them corner you. The call ended. Ethan looked down at Rex. All right, he murmured. We move. They left the mine ridge before dawn, cutting through woods, staying off roads. Ethan moved like he'd never stopped being what he used to be, and Rex moved like he was born for this exact kind of night. Silent, alert, deadly when needed. Behind them, faint sirens wailed once, then stopped. Not because help was coming, because help had been told to stay away. At 5:43 a.m., as the sky began to lighten, Ethan saw headlights on a distant ridge, moving slow, searching. Dalton's people. They were closing the net. Ethan pushed harder, legs burning, lungs cold. Rex kept pace, never once lagging, never once whining. Then, as they reached the creek again near an old service road, a new sound rose above the water. A helicopter, no markings, low and fast. Ethan's heart slammed. The helicopter dropped into the valley like a black hawk, rotors chopping the mist. It hovered over a clearing, then settled hard. A side door slid open. Two figures jumped out in dark gear, moving with purpose. One raised a hand, a signal. Ethan ran. Rex ran. They hit the clearing as the helicopter's wind tore at the trees. A man grabbed Ethan's arm, yanked him toward the cabin of the aircraft. Another clipped a harness onto Ethan without ceremony. The first man looked down at Rex, hesitated a fraction, then nodded once, as if recognizing something in the dog's eyes. Dog comes, he said simply. Rex leapt into the helicopter without being told. Ethan turned just as the aircraft began to lift. Through the spinning mist, he saw vehicles breaking from the tree line near the service road. Dark shapes, headlights off, too late. He saw Dalton Price standing in the rain again, face upturned, rage painted across it. The helicopter rose. Dalton became smaller. Black Alder shrank. Beneath them, like a secret being pulled out of the ground. Ethan sat back, soaked and shaking. Rex pressed against his leg, solid and alive. A man across from him reached out his hand. This time, Ethan took it. Name's Harlan, the man said. EPA Criminal Investigation Division. We got your ping. You did the right thing calling outside. Ethan's throat tightened. Mara Ellis? Harlan's eyes darkened. We found her motel room trashed. We didn't find her body. Ethan's chest went cold. Then she might still be alive. Harlan nodded slowly. Or they moved her. Either way, what you brought is enough to crack the whole thing open. Ethan stared down at the waterproof case in his lap. It won't matter if the county buries it, he said. Harlan's expression hardened. They won't. Ethan exhaled, slow. He looked down at Rex, who stared back with that steady, unbreakable loyalty. Not just a dog, a warning system, a shield, a reason to keep moving when the world tried to swallow you whole. Weeks later, the news broke like thunder. Federal raids on water restoration offices, arrests, barrels pulled from the creek bed. Sheriff Dalton Price taken out of his own office in cuffs, face pale, jaw clenched, finally realizing that control ends the moment truth becomes loud. Grant Larkin disappeared for 3 days, then was caught trying to cross into Canada with cash and a burner phone. And Mara Ellis, they found her alive. Not because the system was kind, but because she'd hidden one last breadcrumb, one last message inside an encrypted folder labeled with a year only a careful mind would choose. 1986. The year the mine collapse happened, the year Black Alder learned to keep secrets. Mara had survived by the same rule Ethan lived by now. Keep moving, keep thinking, trust instinct, trust the partner beside you. On a quiet morning in a safe federal facility far from West Virginia, Mara sat across from Ethan at a metal table, wrapped in a blanket. Face bruised but eyes still sharp. She looked at Rex first. Rex stared back, calm, assessing. Then she looked at Ethan. "You found it?" she said softly. Ethan nodded. "He did." Mara's throat bobbed as if emotion tried to rise, but she forced it down. "They said no one would care. They said the town belonged to them." Ethan's gaze was steady. "It doesn't." Mara leaned back, exhaling. For a moment in that sterile room, there was no conspiracy, no poisoned water, no midnight threats. Just a woman who refused to let evil look normal, and a man who couldn't walk away when the ground itself asked him not to. Rex shifted closer to Ethan, pressing his shoulder against Ethan's knee, the way he always did when the danger had passed, but the echoes still lingered. Ethan put a hand on Rex's neck, feeling the warmth, the solid reality of him. Outside, beyond the window, the world kept turning. But for the first time in a long time, Ethan felt something he hadn't felt since before the war, since before the noise took root in his bones. Not peace, not yet, but the shape of it. A direction, a path. Because sometimes the quiet you're searching for doesn't come from hiding. Sometimes it comes from standing in the rain, listening to the dog who refuses to look away, and deciding that the truth will not stay buried just because powerful men are afraid of what it will reveal.